Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Forster, and this is our latest member spotlight interview for Karam Fellowship. Joining us this month is Charlie Self. Charlie's been part of our community from the very beginning and is a dear friend to me and to many of us. He teaches history as well as other things at Assemblies of God Theological Seminary and is also a pastor and, like me, has his fingers in many other pies as well at any given moment. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for this opportunity for conversation, and it's wonderful seeing our Karam Fellowship grow.
It is. Charlie, let me ask you this first. Tell us about three things going on either at your school or elsewhere in your world that you're encouraged about.
Well, the school is a major part of my world, so I'm in my 20th year now of teaching for the Assemblies of God Theological Seminary. Three things that I'm very encouraged about there and in other schools where I have a little bit of advising or teaching influence. Number one, whole life discipleship and the integration of faith, work, and economics is in the water now. It's in every syllabus. It's not an add-on. It's not a something that's over on the side. It is in the water. And some of the tools we created out of all that Karam has been doing over the years are now part of every student's experience. So I'm very encouraged there. I'm equally encouraged by the empowerment of young women and men seeking credentials. There have been several new grants at our seminary that are helping recruit and retain talented young men and women. We also have some really great initiatives with Hispanic and Latino leaders, Spanish speaking master's and doctoral programs, and then African American focus, which as part of our history is very much central to our ethos. Our history is one of its origins in the Black church, as well as in many other cultures. And today around the world, the places where we're growing the most are in Africa and Latin America. So it's heartening to see the seminary sort of pick up on that and serve that. And then I think a third thing is we're beginning to realize that there's a new economy needed to sustain theological education into the future. So there's some explorations there to make it more accessible and more affordable. So those are some things that are encouraging me, along with the joy of learning from all of my students every semester. I think many of our colleagues can attest to that.
And, that's a regular theme in these spotlight interviews we do. People talk about how life-giving it is to have interactions with students, to see them learn. And I'm especially encouraged by the initiatives you're describing to connect better with the broader church and to seek a better business model for theological education. No doubt we'll be hitting those themes in interviews for years to come, and maybe later in this interview as well. But Charlie, I just want to pick up on one thread and kind of pull on it. I think that connecting better with different cultural groups in the church is an essential theme for the future of theological education. So, can you tell us a little more about what's happening on that front?
Well, there's what used to be accidental is now intentional. What
Mm.
and as a historian, one of the exciting things is to see the global South church prophesying back to the Western church to stay faithful to the gospel. Now, all of us and all of our traditions within these interviews would have a hearty affirmation of that phenomenon. It's not just a Pentecostal one, it's a broader gospel one. And I think the other thing that's exciting is that the global South cultures are part of the renewal of Christianity in the world, in the West, but also have a deep desire for continual improvements in education. They're helping us read the Bible, not differently in the sense of being separated from good language or exegesis, but to see it with eyes that are living in very different situations. And it's so helpful to have that theological reflection. We're in the fourth phase, for example, right now of liberation theology. And it's shed its early Euro Marxism and its early moments of just political agitation and has become a rich and robust way of realizing that people flourishing is complex, and the gospel can speak into that and into what helps people to flourish. The other thing that I'm very heartened by is what I'll call intercultural competency um, is growing as part of our equipping at the seminary. We've done well in missions and missionary training and some of those things for years, but it's now getting in the woodwork, even for our pastoral students, because our local pastors are now pastoring global populations, even in rural pockets, even in smaller neighborhoods. There isn't a lot of homogeneity
Right.
in
The globe has come to us wherever we are in the modern
exactly,
world.
and that's
And
good news for the church and for the gospel.
And it's not the first time that other regions of the church have summoned the Western Church to faithfulness. I wrote my dissertation on the fourth and fifth century at a time when African and Asian churches were the bulwarks against the Arian heresy, which the European churches were very susceptible to. So praise God for that. But let me move on to my next question.
Okay.
What are one or two things that you think are the biggest challenges in theological education right now?
I think, well, I'll give you two. One is creating long-term careers for quality faculty, men and women. With all of the online situations, the hybridizing, you walk into many of our seminaries on most weeks or most days, it's pretty quiet. There's a few residential classes, but it's a pretty quiet place. And then the doctoral seminars come in and it gets lively and the different hybrid things come in. So I would say one of the challenges for our seminaries, and I'll put this within denominations and networks as well, is to place a value on the academic vocation in service of the church and have men and women who qualify and are called to really have a sense of, I might teach a class that two or three schools might see at the same time, or I might teach a class in more than one place, but I can be anchored in a community. I can have a full-time compensation and have some of, and forgive the old-fashioned word here, but a little bit of leisure to actually publish and think. Because what we've been doing for 25 years now is commodifying. And with the excess of PhDs that exist, and by the way, I thank God for the good colleagues that exist. Um, it creates a very potential for being merely contractual or commodification. And so I think that's a major one. And that leads to the second one, which is how do we fund this? And what's interesting is I would argue that it's going to be a mix of old and new. Um, we need to be less tuition driven and find benefactors that can really establish substantial support, scholarships, endowments, chairs, that kind of thing. And we need to also prepare future generations that multi-occupational ministry may be part of their life and that the seminary herself is actually embedded in the community and may have some economic initiatives that will help fund her operations. So I think there's a bit of old and new there. We've seen some different models within our own network, subscription models, different kinds of scholarshiping, but I think that's going to be an ongoing conversation for
Yeah,
quite a while.
we're going to be discovering in the next generation what that might look like. And to your first point, online modalities are great for extending access to education to people who can't get it otherwise. But doing that well is dependent on the existence of a well-stewarded learning community at the center of it. So it can't
Yes.
just be people in front of screens, rows and rows of screens,
Oh.
world without end. There has to be some sort of learning community behind it.
Well, the other thing we have to link it with local churches as well. I'd like to share an example. Now, this is at the undergraduate level, but a dear friend of mine, Dr. Robert Roden, took a little tiny Bible college and has turned it into a decent sized online provider, single focus. They provide one degree that leads people toward credentialing within our movement, prepares them for seminary. So I want to be really clear, they're not doing everything. But in order to be in this program, you are part of one of scores of church partners where you are being mentored, you're involved in the church, you're getting experience. And now we have online educators giving their best content, but that best content has a place to be put into practice. And there's other examples of this going on at the seminary level as well. So that combination of church engagement, mentoring, excellent academics, all of our seminaries aspire to it. And in spite of so many people insulting us saying, well, I didn't learn this in seminary, the fact is you really probably did. You just forgot it, because I don't know of any of our seminaries represented by this network or others that don't care about the whole person, that don't care about both practical and academic theology. What they care about is the integrity of what has been developed over the last 500 years.
That's right. Charlie, my last question, what would you like to see happen next in theological education?
Two things that come to my mind. One is I'd like us to, and this is very personal and part of what I've been working on for 20 years. I'd like us to really, within each of our communities, um, define wholeness and health as a follower of Christ better than we do, to think about the outcomes of what it looks like to follow Christ, because from healthy disciples come healthy leaders. And so I would say I want to give out a challenge to think about outcome-based discipleship, again, within the language and culture of our seminaries. And then secondly, a profile of healthy leadership that liberates us from Thomas Carlyle and liberates us from just forgive the non-inclusive language here, but the kind of the great man theory. We could say the great man or great person. And there are moments that some really wonderful people have, those kind of characteristics. But the biblical call to humility and servant leadership, and I put it in 4 C's: character, charism, competency, and capacity. And helping the students we serve, grow in character, of course, discover what well, I should say, refine their charisms, and then develop the competencies needed. By the way, if you're going to be a pastor, you're going to visit a hospital. So competencies matter. You need economic competencies you didn't need 2 generations ago, cultural competencies, and then finally capacity. Capacity can grow, and I'm not speaking just about how large things are, but to kind of know what our fields are and to know where we're supposed to be yoked with Christ and plowing the gospel field we've been assigned. So I'm hopeful that both discipleship and leadership, and we've got such great materials out on all of these from many of our colleagues in our network, but I hope they can get in the water.
Amen to that. And to overcoming the you can be the next William Wilberforce approach and saying, instead of go out there and change the world, you can change your factory floor, right? You can change the classroom that you work in. Charlie, thank you so much, as always, for being part of our community.
It's a delight, and I'm grateful to share with you.